This episode of the Better Every Shift podcast is brought to you by Lexipol, the experts in policy, training, wellness support, and grants assistance for first responders and government leaders. To learn more, visit lexipol.com. That's LEXIPOL.com. Now let's get into the show.
Everybody, welcome to the Better Every Shift podcast. My name is Aaron Zamzow. I am a fire lieutenant up in Wisconsin. I'm also a writer for Fire Rescue 1. And the person I love to write for is the editor-in-chief. I call her the commander, Janelle Fosquet, who is also with us. Janelle, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to talk to this group of folks.
Well, they're almost like a rock band. You know, it kind of looks at, if you're watching this on video, we got the crew from Truck 6 at the time when they made a dramatic rescue. We have the crew here from Hilton Head Island Fire Rescue who won the IAFC's Ben Franklin Award for Valor in the Face of Danger. And then we're excited to talk about their rescue, and just some of their experiences since and what led up to it. And so with us today, we got now Battalion Chief David Bell, Lieutenant Sean Kavlick, Fire Apparatus Operator Brendan Horlbeck. Welcome, you guys. Thanks for being here. Congrats on the award and the grab.
Yeah, congrats.
Thank you.
So we talked about this a little bit behind the scenes. A little confusing because you got a battalion chief and a lieutenant and an AE. But at the time, you guys were all on Truck 6. And Chief, where were you guys when this grasp was made?
I was a captain at the time on Truck 6. And then Sean was an FAO and Brendan was an FAO. So they were my two drivers. It's tillered apparatus. So it was the three of us. And we did have a jump seat firefighter, an irons guy with Colin Keys, who doesn't work for our department anymore. But it was the four of us on Truck 6.
So you pull up, Sean, were you in front or back?
I was in the tiller that day.
The best seat in the house is really what a lot of people say. And then Brendan, you were in front driving.
I was.
And you know, Chief, you said the MDC's coming out. So you guys get dispatched. Give me a little bit about what time of the day was it? And then what kind of things are you seeing on your MDC?
So it was early morning, and the guys can correct me. I think around 4 a.m., maybe a little bit before.
I believe it's at between 2 and 3.
Okay.
Chief, from
Yeah.
what I remember.
So it's coming out of that broken sleep and climbing into a truck and going from 0 to 100 as quickly as you can, and it goes out as a structure fire. And I'm sure everyone listening to this knows that not every call that goes out as a structure fire is a structure fire. So you're moving with a sense of purpose, but at the same time, you're kind of holding in reserve until you figure out exactly what you're dealing with. And the CAD notes very, very quickly made it look like we were dealing with something significant. Significant fire, multiple people trapped. And at that point, that I'm passing this information along to them as well. Like, all right, this is legit. This is time to go to work. This isn't going to be a false call. It's going to be significant, and we got to be ready when we come off the truck.
So Sean, you're back there going, oh, okay, I got to get the rest of my gear on now, right? I mean, you're still trying to drive. For those that don't necessarily drive a tiller, kind of give us a little background. So you got to hop down, grab your gear. Everybody else has their gear on at this point, correct?
Yep, everybody. Drivers will be, half dressed just for better maneuverability while driving. Makes it a little bit easier to drive. But I had kind of a distinct view in the tiller box. You get a view that not really the guys up front can really see. So we knew we were going to an active fire. You could tell by the dispatcher's voices. It's different when they know it's something real and there's entrapment compared to possible structure fire, stow fire or something of that nature. But coming around the circle that splits our district, I had the distinct smell of smoke that only comes from a structure fire. And I could see the glow, even though we were about 4 cross streets away at the time. So I was able to rely to the rest of the guys, hey, this is going to be something because I could see it glow already in the distance.
Yeah, you do have a great perspective back there. Like seriously, it's got to be one of the greatest places to see. You know, there's nothing obstructing your view a lot of times, right? So you're seeing this, you're relaying this, and Brandon, you're driving in front, and you're thinking, okay, where am I going to place this darn thing, right? Like, is Chief telling you, hey, this is where I want you to go in, or kind of what are you thinking at this point?
I had pulled up right. The engine was actually in front of us because there's a Station 6 has a engine with us, and it's a different crew. So there's actually 7 to 8 people there every shift, and
Okay.
they were in front of us, and I pulled up almost right behind them,
Okay.
and what I thought was pretty good location. So turned
Yeah.
onto the street and stopped almost at the front door, essentially. I mean, when we opened up the door, you could feel the heat pouring from the structure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you guys are pulling up your double company. So engine 6 is rolling in front of you, truck 6 behind. So take me through this, Chief Bell. Like you're thinking, all right, we got people in the structure. With the way that your department runs, are you automatically you're saying, hey, we know we're going search. They're pulling a line, you know, like take us through kind of what the fire ground is going through at this point.
Yeah. What's actually, to kind of give everything a moment of levity. We had was Trey newly promoted, or was he still acting?
He was
on
still
the engine?
acting.
Okay, so we had an acting lieutenant on Engine 6. Great guy, has since been promoted and is a solid fire officer. But where this fire was located, it was inside a resort community, and these aren't acre lots and 2-acre lots. These are lots big enough to fit large houses, and that's it. And you're not looking at a lot of spread out people that are living in their residence. So Trey had marked on scene literally, I don't know, 15 seconds before we did, and marked on scene with 75% involvement. And my initial thought was there is no way a house in this development would ever get to 75% involvement without someone calling it in sooner. So my mind was, I've got an acting lieutenant who's getting caught up in the moment, and we might have fire through the roof, but it could be a very small area that's actually involved. We round the corner and the house is every bit of 75% involved. And the initial shock of seeing that in this area, that you just would not see a fire advance that far without prior notice for us, really set in motion. Like, all right, we're going to have to do things that we don't normally do. And one of it, which is going into an interior search in those conditions. So when the truck pulls up, we're primarily the Alpha crew, which is the officer and the irons guy. They're tasked with search. That's a given on 90% of the fires that we go to. And in this case, outside vent was not going to be needed by the Bravo crew. So part of why things go well in a lot of instances, and why they went well on this one, I've worked with these guys for years. Now, Colin was the exception. That was only the second shift I'd ever worked with him. But Lieutenant Kavlick and FAO Horlbeck, we've worked together for years. We've been friends for years. They know how I operate. They know what I'm going to do without me saying it. And those two, without me having to verbalize really anything, knew they were coming in for search as well. Because I exited the truck, met with one of the occupants who had gotten out, and asked where they were. And he did his best to kind of guide me to where he thought they may be. But as you can imagine, he was kind of excited as well. And then the challenge was finding a way in. I went to the front door on the Alpha side, and everything was on fire. And past that door, like you said, there's no survivability behind that. That's not a searchable space that's going to lead to a positive outcome. And I was able to locate another door. It ended up being like a kind of like a room over the garage, but the garage was attached. So it was kind of weird. That side of the house dropped down below grade for the garage, and this room was sort of above it. I talked to the engine acting officer, and I was like, see if you can find another way in. This is the only way I've got right now. See if you can find another way in. We're going in this way. And Trey, actually, when he finished his 360, he located a victim on Side Charlie who had gone out a window and was kind of on, I think it was like on a HVAC service yard that's elevated. He was kind of just hanging out there to get away from the flames. And Trey got him down and rescued him. So before we had even gone in, our engine officer had already gotten one individual out of the house.
So Sean, your guys are now you and Brendan are teamed up, and then Chief
Bravo.
and Bravo team. Okay, so you guys are also looking probably for a spot to go in, talking to each other. I mean, what are you seeing at this point too? I mean, obviously you guys it's hot. I mean, there's a lot of fire, and you're probably thinking the same thing as, because you guys work together a lot, train together a lot. So you're probably thinking this kind of the same thing, just trying to find a way in, right? What are you guys going through?
Yeah, so we showed up, and like Chief was saying, involvement with very limited access points. But showing up, normally our initial task would be to set up the aerial. It had already vented through every possible point except for the point where we made entry. So we knew we didn't need the aerial right now. That was going to be if we decided to go defensive, that allowed time for us to set up the aerial. I saw Chief Bell run across the yard, talk to one of the callers, and he also pointed to me and said there's 3 people still in there. So I got down, was starting to get dressed, and I yelled over to Brendan that they were going in for primary search. By the time we got dressed, we got to the door, the Alpha Bravo corner, which was probably the only tenable space in the house and the only place to make entry. But there was no decision. We were going in for primary search because there were still 2 more unaccounted for, and we had tenable search areas. At that point, they had Colin had already forced entry into the door. Brendan and I masked up. I saw that Chief and Colin went on a right-hand search, so we decided to go on a left-hand search. And I think we maybe made it 15 feet into the structure once I heard them call that they had a victim. So we immediately went back to assist pulling that victim out.
Okay. And Brandon, how big of and Chief, you could chime in too. Like, how big of a structure is this? I know I've been on Hilton Head. I've been down there, and there's some beautiful homes down there. I mean, is this 3,000-4,000 square feet, you think, or how big?
I looked it up actually yesterday. It was 4,900 square feet.
Okay. Yeah.
Per Zillow. So
okay.
You can still see the pictures of what it looks. I think they bulldozed it. If I'm not, yeah. But it was still, because of what happened, it was still upright and everything for months after the incident. But it was 4,900 square feet.
Wow. Yeah. So for those listening, 4,900 square feet. Typical single family. Well, depending upon your area of the country, is anywhere from 1,500 to 2,000. So you're looking at almost the size of 2 to 3 houses. But knowing your territory, you guys are saying this area, we know we got big houses. How offset or how far back was it from the road?
Yeah, it was close. Yeah.
Okay. So it was right there.
The other thing that's interesting to note, it's a short-term rental house. So the occupants were people that were just staying, for a week. So it's not like a house that they've lived in for 10 years and they know every door and window and every way out. The other thing that was odd about it, and I'm not sure if Brendan of Zillow has any of the layout on it, it was like a maze. It was really odd the way the rooms were, the way hallways connected, where staircases led to. It was disorienting. There was an elevator shaft in there as well. Lots of danger with this house being on fire with zero visibility.
Well, do you think the maze-like conditions, do you think that contributed to why it was about 75% involved by the time you guys got there? Or was it a delay in calling it in because the occupants maybe didn't even realize the fire had started, or any insights there?
Yeah, I think, and I don't want to speak to cause because I don't know what the final determination of cause was, but I think that the fire spread was not a normal, there's a fire in the kitchen and it sets off every smoke detector and everyone wakes up. I think the fire spread was different in this case. And by the time they were woken up, it was already well advanced.
So you guys, so now you locate this victim, very large structure. Team, you're a Bravo team, you're doing left hand, and Chief, you're doing right hand. You call for them, say, hey, we got somebody. So what happens at this point?
Yeah, so they had located the victim and heard them, and it sounded like they were not struggling, but they were having a difficult time getting that victim. Having a tough time holding on to the severity of burns that she had at the time. And she was also unconscious later on, found to be in cardiac arrest once we got her out. So there was no of the victim assisting us anyway. We just knew we had to get her out with high heat and zero visibility, finding our way back to the door.
Yes, you guys are also thinking about, okay, this is getting so hot for us even, but we got to, I want to talk, how were you able to identify that it was a person, Chief? There's a little backstory to this. That's, I think it kind of, in a way we can have a little chuckle because we're all, in the fire service. It's like some certain things stick out. Give me the background on how you were really able to identify.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I said, it's a little bit of a smiling anecdote to throw in there, but there's also some reasons why something that minor becomes important. So we spoke earlier about the CAD notes, and I'm reading these off to the guys going to the call because they obviously can't see the screen. And we've got fire, we've got three possible victims still inside, and then I said out loud, even with a question mark, and one victim has a walking boot. And I said it out loud. Of course, nobody responds to it because everyone's thinking what they got to do. And I remember thinking, what was that? I've never seen that as a note in anything, much less for people trapped in a structure fire. So you read it, you see it, whether it registers and stays with you or not, you don't know. You show up and you start going to work. What was interesting about this incident, I also teach a TIC class for our new recruits, and I've done it for years and did a lot of work with bringing the thermal imaging cameras to our department back when we only had one on the entire department many years ago. So, I lean on TICs heavily in fire responses, and going into this fire, obviously a ton of fire in the areas that we couldn't search, but the rest of the house was filled with extremely thick, dark, hot, black smoke. And it made the TIC of extremely limited use because there was really no way to see the screen. And at one point, I had the screen pressed up against my SCBA mask, trying to figure out where we were in the room and do a decent TIC-oriented search, and couldn't see anything on it. So you go back to the boot comment, the firefighter that found her behind me in a blind search wasn't sure that was a victim. He just knew he had run into something and he couldn't figure out what it was. And he brought me over. I actually couldn't even see Colin. We were shoulder to shoulder and I couldn't see him. And I said, take my hand and put it on what you found. And he grabbed my hand and put it on her. And that's, we determined all right, no, you've got someone. And that individual had a boot on. Now, in the process of getting her out, we knocked the boot off, but that kind of speaks to the conditions that we were dealing with. Departments all over the country every day are fighting fire and making grabs, and that's awesome. And I really hope that we shed more light on that, what firefighters across the country do, but they're not all the same, and some of them are extremely challenging. And when we train firefighters, we need to train them that way, that it's not going to be that you go in and do a right hand search and you see a victim and you grab them. Sometimes you don't even know you have the victim because it's that difficult of conditions. We've spoken a little bit about the heat, and like Brendan said, coming off the truck, you could feel the heat. Our victim sustained significant burns. That stuff that's usually not replicated in a training situation, and it really speaks volumes to what's expected of the modern firefighter and in the fire service, the conditions that they have to operate under.
Yeah. And the other part of this then, and I think Sean and Brendan, you were also talking about this, is now you get there and the rescue dummy is one thing that we go through and train with, but when you have an actual victim and talking with, other members of the fire service that have been involved in this. Like, they're slippery. They're obviously, right? Like, it's a big challenge to get them out. You're also trying to remember, hey, we got to try to protect airway. We have to try to protect spine. And so as you guys are coming together, hey, we got somebody, the other crew. How hard was it, Brendan, for you guys to find them?
There was, we walked in, like, kind of what Lieutenant said, like, we walked into and only made it in about 15 feet, and they kind of ran into us, like, coming out. So basically, and then we just transitioned, and mind you that to get into the door that we went in, it was like 6 to 10 steps up, like brick steps, the way the layout was set up. So they kind of, Chief and Colin kind of ran into us with the victim, and we were able to transition where passing off. And at one point, Lieutenant ended up taking, I guess, the legs, I think, from Colin, and then Chief still had her arms, but I know that, like, and then we transitioned even more once we got down the steps and when we moved her into the yard.
And then at that point, like, were you guys, did you contemplate, hey, can we go back in? Our conditions, obviously you're calling in, so paramedics are on the way there. Take me through that last little bit. You get her out, and now what happens?
Well, that's I'll let these guys speak to it, but that's actually something else I wanted to point out. So we don't have a EMS service on the island. The fire department runs all the EMS. So every firefighter that is on duty is at least an EMT basic, and a significant number of us, Brendan included, are paramedics. So when we got her out, there was no initial handoff to a ambulance that's waiting to do treatment. The 4 of us started CPR and started administering care. And that, again, these dual service fire departments across the country, that shows some of the challenges that they're faced with, that we had to go from an extremely high stress, high danger environment to then an analytical type 1 to treat medical injuries and provide care while still in turnout gear. And I think I was still masked up. I don't think I'd pulled my mask off, as Sean either. Brendan eventually did, because Brendan stayed with her to administer additional care once we did have a medic crew that are other firefighters for us there to offer care. Then, like you said, we've still got 1 unaccounted for. So we went right back in. And at that point, and I'm sure that there's plenty of studies that's on this, where your perception of time changes in that type of environment. And what seemed to me that it was happening over a longer stretch of time was actually happening in a very short amount of time with us going back in. And these guys will tell you, and that's why I said I'll defer to them. I had to ask them after the incident, hey, what happened next? What did we do next? Because I couldn't place where we were once that Sentinel event happened, with getting her to the front yard and starting CPR and then passing off care. From that point on, we worked for hours, hours after that, multiple cylinders, without going to rehab and continuing work. I couldn't place where we were for a lot of it. And I actually had to ask them, hey, what did we do next? What was after that? So Sean, I know you helped me out with a lot of it. So if you want to talk about when we went back in.
Yeah, immediately after we handed off patient care to the ambulance and paramedics, Colin, Chief, and I went back into the structure. And give you an idea how quickly conditions were changing. When we came out of that structure with the victim, it was 0 visibility, high heat, 0 visibility. When we went back in a short couple minutes later to finish our search, you had 100% visibility, and it was completely free burning at that point. I think they had started ventilation of the area that we were in, which helped with visibility, but then it just turned it into a complete free burn with still high heat. And we finally made it to a stairwell that we hadn't made it to yet. And Chief Bell went up to go see if there was any tenable space up there. And there was not. And it was at a point where at the top of the stairs, equipment that we had with us, water cans and things, were physically melting. So we knew if our equipment was melting, there was no survivable space up there. But it was wild to see how quickly the conditions changed just when you added a little bit of ventilation to a 0 visibility environment.
Yeah. But then of course you're adding oxygen and it's getting hotter and hotter and hotter. Right. And so you got to look at survivability, which we've had numerous discussions on this podcast about with the guys from UL. And a lot of their studies are obviously kind of talking about survivability. Let me just ask that, like, as far as training, you guys as a crew, you do a lot of training together. Did the UL studies and are those kind of coming out in your head as you're looking at this particular structure?
The rescue survey, where most of your victims found. And a lot of that, comes to play in your mind. You're going to look at hallways, you're going to look at egress points and bedrooms. However, the way that this house was set up and maze it was, you couldn't tell what was a hallway and what was a split level and what was a bedroom. I think the area we were in, it was a makeshift kitchen with one bedroom that led to a stairwell that we weren't sure what was up there because we couldn't search it. So we know where victims are usually found, but with the way this house is split up, we were unsure of what they might have considered to be a hallway or egress point or a bedroom or windows. So
yeah,
the structure itself made the search tougher.
Yeah. And you're keeping in the back of your head, you've talked about it a lot. Like, all right, we got to also understand survivability of these guys. Cause at a certain point, you're putting yourself in that danger point, Brendan, when they were still going back for search, you did patient care. And then what happened? You met back up with them and then went back to work.
Yes. Unfortunately, she was in cardiac arrest at that point, and then we brought her back, and then the transition kind of happened right around that time is when she came back. Then medic crew kind of took over, and I helped them a little bit and just pretty much moved the victim to the ambulance. And then I went back to work and met those guys back inside the house. And I saw that what Lieutenant's talking about, like all of us were on the stairwell and Chief ended up going up into the third, or looking in the third story, or going up the steps. From what I remember, I think it was a third story, maybe it was a second. And you could see, like Lieutenant was saying, like you could see everything, and it was nothing but fire above Chief when he went up to that top of the staircase.
And you guys, it's not like Chicago Fire where you guys weren't in gear, fairly sweating, right? Isn't that crazy when you watch these TV shows and then you're in middle of this and you're like, God darn, those things are so full of crap, right? Like it's hot. You can't see next to you. You can't even read your tick. When you mentioned too, Chief, like training, going back to that, I had some great discussions with Annie Starnes about ticks, and, victims don't necessarily look like a victim in a tick, and it's a tool, just like, search techniques are a tool and an axe is a tool. It sounds like all your tools and all of your skills kind of came together for this one, I like to call it, it's your Super Bowl moment, because, you guys have been in like 25 years, I believe, Chief and Lieutenant, are you been in 18 years or 12 years?
About
12 years. And then, and Brendan, you've been about 15 years. Is that
12?
12. Okay.
Yeah.
Is this the first time you had an opportunity to make a grab?
Yeah, this is my first grab.
Yeah, I actually had one.
Here's the guy, huh?
Yeah, they give me a hard time about it. So yeah, I actually had one. Really, I think it was 2017, right around there. So a few years before.
Okay.
First
time for Brendan. Yeah, and training for what, hours and hours and hours, right? For this one moment. And so again, congrats you guys on making this. And I want to now just kind of switch a little bit. Like, let's talk about what set this up, what set you guys up for success. I'll go one by one. Chief, give me one thing that you think really set you up. You touched on a couple, but let's reiterate one that you think is the major reason that you guys were successful here.
I don't know if I can hit on one. I mean, to me, it's like a combination of several things. I mentioned it earlier. There's a ton to be said for crew continuity and having high performing individuals together in an environment where they can train together, where they can bounce ideas off of each other, where they can discuss tactics. Like I said, these guys, they're not new to me. They're not a stranger off the street. Like I remember each of their first shift ever in the fire department. I remember them coming in as probies, and then fast forward and we're part of it together and training together and having those kitchen table discussions. I really think enough cannot be said about the importance of having crew continuity and having an environment where people feel comfortable working together, where they feel comfortable voicing their opinions. And the guys will tell you, like, people tell me that there's things that I can improve, and I'm more than willing to listen to them. It does make a difference when people feel that way, working together with each other as to what the actual product is going to be moving forward. I will throw this out, and it might get a chuckle as well, and maybe it touches on a few nerves, but I always stressed physical fitness with my crews. And at one point, there was, whether said directly or indirectly, a joke went around about Truck 6 on B shift that all they did was work out. I'll take that all day long. If that's what my crew is known for, then I'll take that, because this is an extremely physically demanding job. And this really illustrated that. And it puts a demand on you physically and mentally. We went through, I think it was 4 cylinders before we technically went to rehab, and that spanned over several hours before we were taking a break because of the work that needed to be done. So I can't stress that enough, that I think that is a factor in when you have a high stress, a high danger event like this, that you're gonna fall back on your training, you're gonna fall back on what you've learned, you're gonna fall back on what you drilled on. But if the physical fitness isn't there, none of that matters, and you won't be able to deliver.
Well said. I agree 100%. Yeah. Lieutenant, what do you think? What's one reason he took a good one, so you got to come up with a different one now.
Oh, no, I agree with everything you just said. But going back to the training aspect, the amount of hours that we spend training, it doesn't necessarily mean in gear on air at the training center, but just having round tables during dinner about hypotheticals. What would you do in this situation or this situation? I think really helped us for this incident. Waking up at 3 a.m. and going from a dead sleep to rescue mode in a matter of 5-6 minutes. Your training comes into play, and it becomes more muscle memory, and you don't have to think about what you've done or how you're going to do it or what everyone's roles are. It's just, what everyone's roles are, and your training just comes into play, and you don't even think. You just go through and you do what the job is that needs to be done.
I like the fact too. It's kind of like indirect training. You just have these conversations. It doesn't have to be an hour long, but it's just it sets up your crew kind of environment too. I think what Chief said. Like, hey, with these guys, we'll look at that 4,000 square foot, single family home where you guys are from there, working, and we're like, okay, so we got fire showing on the Alpha side. That doesn't mean there can't be people on the Charlie and Delta, right? Like, how would we approach it? So very well spoken, and so far 2 really good ones. Now, of course, Brendan has a tough part. He's got to come up with a third here.
I got all the pressure now, I guess.
Yep.
And I, of course, agree with both what Chief and Lieutenant said, is that, physical fitness is huge. And I think as I've gotten older and been in the fire service for longer, I think it's become more important. And all the things that Chief told me many years ago about physical fitness and the importance of it was, at the time, I think I was listening, but it really hit home over the last few years when I started to get older and I start to feel my body like kind of deteriorate in some regards.
Catch up.
That comes up with age, of course. Yeah. So the physical fitness, it's like this constant state of readiness. And when I say that, it was more of going from that 3 a.m. wake up to being ready to go to work, and then adding in the training, which will help you hit our objectives. So just basically going through all that stuff, and everything ties together in the constant state of readiness in terms of knowing that could happen at any time. I'm working right now. It could happen, unfortunately, right now. Like we just know, and us being together for a while, we had an idea that eventually could happen, and it had already happened to Chief at one point. So it's reality, and knowing that in back of our minds, we always have to be, like I said, constant state of readiness. But the physical fitness aspect of it is so important in terms of going through the 4 cylinders. And we were working from 3 a.m. and we end up getting relief from the oncoming shift at about 8:30 in the morning, and we didn't stop until 8:30 in the morning. They were like, all right, guys, like, you're done, come. And we're cleaning up or trying to help them clean up, and they had to pretty much pry us away from the scene. So, but that's all three of us, and even Colin, who, like we were saying, that doesn't work with us anymore. Like, all of us were in pretty good physical fitness at the time, and I think all of us are, well, the three of us are currently. So it adds up, all that stuff, and it's more the recovery at the same time, where you're going to go through the cylinders, and when you have the 5 minutes of break where you're actually just getting another cylinder is where your recovery has to be paramount, because you're going right back inside. So all of that stuff is very important, and I can't reiterate that enough.
Yeah. So when Brendan hits on that constant state of readiness, that is of utmost importance, because, and I'm sure departments all across the country, 80%, 75, 80% medical, like that's what we're running. We have transport EMS. So that adds to that number. And when we have some younger guys, when we have some people that haven't been in the fire service as much, and they're running medical calls over and over and over again, it starts to build that, well, what's the chances I'm going to have a fire? What's the chances I'm going to have a big fire? What's the chances that this is going to happen? That's going to happen. And today's fire service is not the fire service from 25 years ago. And the calls are different. The demands on the fire service are different. And, some jurisdictions, ours seems to ebb and flow, but the number of structure fires aren't what they were years ago. And I think that lulls people into a false sense of security with this job and what it is that they're going to be tasked to do. It might be cliche to say, well, you never know, at any moment you could have that career fire, but it's a fact. There is no do-over in this profession. You've got to be ready for whatever it is that you're called to do. And there is always that chance. So it shouldn't be that what's the chance? It should be there's always that chance that I'm going to have to do something that I've never done before in a situation that I've never been in before.
So we heard about what set you guys up for success. What about lessons learned after the fact? Is there anything afterwards that you look back and said, I wish I'd done this differently?
That's a tough one, because I think that requires a lot of introspection and in looking into, potentially a scene that we're being given an award for, and then try and figure out, like, all right, well, what wasn't good. But the fact is that there was a lot that wasn't good. And again, it's not letting little things derail you. So at this point, I think I was a year shy of 25 when this happened, somewhere around there, years in the fire service. Well, with Hilton Head, and then I had another 4 outside of that. First time I've ever gotten caught up in a seatbelt coming off of the truck. And not like a little snagged, like caught up to the point that I was reaching for my knife out of my turnout pants. So, something, don't break your routine when you have the high stress incident. Keep doing everything like you've always done it. I've tried to gain a few seconds getting out of the truck, and it cost me a few seconds. But to kind of get away from, I guess, maybe the tactic side of it, there's a significant mental and emotional strain on firefighters that are on these types of incidents. And we're not comfortable with ourselves sometimes voicing that. And it's a hard thing to come to terms with. And I know that there is a much better push in the fire service now on the mental health side. And I think that's important. And I probably didn't think that was important before this incident. And this incident has shown me the importance of that, and that there's another side to the ladders and the hoses and the tactics, that there's a mental side, there's an emotional side that has to be addressed. And it's not easy to do that with firefighters, because we don't want to admit when we are struggling with that stuff. But this incident, for all of its positive outcomes, was still a tragic incident. There was still one individual that perished in the fire. And, for the longest time, I looked at this incident as a failure on my part because of that. And that took a lot of kind of soul searching to come to terms with. So I think that part of it, understanding the emotional and mental side, is something that I can do better. And I think really the fire service, while we're trending in the right direction, I think the fire service can do better with it as well.
Yeah. in the words of Dr. Rachel Zemlock, it's okay to be human, Chief. We actually did a great webinar on that. And I had some of the same thoughts. And she just came back and said, you know what? It's okay to be human. And it was like, well, no, but we're firefighters.
That's right.
You know, right? Like, but so, yeah, very well said. Great lesson to be learned there. Lieutenant, how about you? What's your take on that? Like, what else can you improve, or maybe what didn't go so well that you could work on?
I think anytime that there's a sense of, I guess, unfulfillment, in this case, the fatality, and I don't think it's really just on structure fires, but any call that we're on where fatality is involved, whether it's cardiac arrest or a motor vehicle accident, we always something we could have done different, something we could have done better. And really the only thing that you can take from that is learn from those mistakes. Maybe it won't happen again. Now in this instance where fatality was in the home, was, you know, our minds now looking back at it, untenable space, and there's probably no survivability from that point when we showed up on scene. But just learn from mistakes, talk about the mistakes that you made if you think there was any, or things you could do better to fix next time, and just always expect victims when you show up or dispatch to a structure fire.
Yeah, great point. Great. There's writing on a couple firehouse walls that I've been in. It's just said, expect heat, expect victims, expect fire. Every call. Like, if you have that mindset, you know, but it is difficult. Brandon, what's your take?
Same thing as Chief and Lieutenant were talking about. It's actually because sometimes when being in this predicament that we were in, and then and a lot of I think we had almost every engine company available was there at one point, either on an ambulance or on a fire engine. It actually, I think it makes our training better, because when you can bring something from real life, either, unfortunately for this incident, we did have the one fatality, but you can kind of transition that into training and make us all better. But we are all our number one critics. We're like, I know it's similar to Chief, and I was tough on myself when I came home, even that morning, and talked to my wife about it on the phone and everything like that. And I remember we were on the way back in when we got a relief, and it's us and the engine company riding back together in an ambulance, and it was a pin drop. Like, all of us were exhausted, and we didn't say a word. Like, nobody said anything until we got back to the station. Even then, it was kind of like, take our gear off, decon our gear, decon some other stuff, and then go home. And then we didn't really touch on it until the following shift. So all of us were all mentally, physically exhausted. But the way I look at it in terms of there is things I would change in my own personal experience in terms of what I can take from it. But everything is a positive, because you get better. And you're supposed to get better. Like, these are all teaching moments. And unfortunately, a teaching moment like this is there's a fatality, but we did end up finding 2 of the 3 victims and making a difference in their lives forever and their families' lives. So the unfortunate part is that, like I said, there was a victim that did not make it through this incident, but I have to always look at it like, how can we get better? It's like, the negative is not always we present it as negative as it could be, but does it make our training better? Does it make us as better firemen? Like, the experiences and even the stuff as we move along in our careers, what we can pass on to the newer generation, the newer firefighters, because that's what it comes down to, is that we've been there. So they've never been there, and how are they going to react? And they may not even know until they get into that situation. So.
And were you able to connect with the female victim who you saved? Were you able to connect with her after the fact and her family? And how does that feel afterwards?
Yeah, we were. And this is the other side of the fire service. A lot of times we interact with these individuals in obviously a worst day of their life scenario. And in the cases where we have positive outcomes, it needs to be celebrated, and especially on our end, so that we see, hey, here's the fruits of your labor. But it's not something that always happens. And even For us, for running EMS, we run a significant number of cardiac arrests, and we have a very robust save rate. But we don't always connect with those individuals, or we don't find out, what the end result is. So the other part of it, the human part of it, is while we're pleased with what we've done and the outcome that we've had, when you reconnect with someone, you're asking them to relive that incident over and over again every time they're around us and every time they're speaking about it, because that's how they know us. That's the context. It's not that we're their neighbor. It's not that we're someone that they deal with professionally. That their whole reason for knowing us is they had an extremely bad incident and we were there. And luckily we got the outcome that we wanted for 2 of the 3 individuals. But yeah, she came to the fire station once she got out of the burn unit. She was in the burn unit for a while. Came with her husband. Wonderful people. Just absolute. You kind of get a read on people when you're around them, when they exude positivity and a love for life. And that was the 2 of them completely. And the husband actually did not know some of the story, so he found out about it for the first time in that setting. He didn't know that she was in cardiac arrest when she came out of the house, and that we performed CPR in the front yard. So that was an emotional moment for him as well. But it was good for the crews that were there on that scene. They got to see, hey, this is why you train the way you do. This is why you put in the hours that you do. This is why we stress physical fitness. And then they were actually kind enough to come back to the island for an award ceremony that we had as well, so that other members of the community, not just at that fire station and that were on that call, got to learn of the story and see the end result. When we, have a budget that asks for certain things, this is why. And she was actually very adamant about that, saying like, whenever you need a reason as to why things are done, I'm the reason. I'm standing here because of you guys doing the things that you've done, because of the way this department operates. And Sean and Brendan have heard me say this before, but you guys haven't. So I've got a fresh audience. I know they get tired of hearing it, but the cliche with why we're in the fire service and why we do things the way we do is we want to help people. Like that we hear it a lot. We embody it in our actions, but you ask a lot of people, why did you become a firefighter? Why did you go into EMS or even law enforcement? And I want to help people, but it's really much more than that. And that's like a surface answer. And if you start to get into the whys, you'll see it. And in her letter, she wrote a really, really nice letter to us explaining some things, her life afterwards. And she talks about how she's able to do things that she wouldn't have been able to do had we not gotten her out of that house, and how a walk on the beach with her husband means more to her now than it did before. But what I got out of some of the initial things she said, and I don't want to repeat it word for word, is that not only is her life different now, is her children, their lives are different because she's still alive. And her children's lives are going to be different because she's still there. So we interacted with her for a matter of minutes, but the impact is generational. It's going to continue. Every single person in that family's life is different because of the actions that happened on that scene. And when you think from it from that aspect, when you do have a bad shift, when you do have a policy that comes out that you're not crazy about, that stuff is so minor compared to what the effects are of our actions, the positive effects, how far reaching they are, and ultimately at the end of the day, how it affects the world that we live in. That's the big picture thing that it's hard to get across. And I don't know that I always saw it. I definitely see it now. And it puts things in perspective. It really does. When you start thinking about the fire service, what's good and what's bad, it really outweighs so much of what we get caught up on sometimes.
Yeah, no, very well said. I agree. Of course, now the firefighter in me has to ask, did she have the walking boot on when you met her?
No.
Did you tell her that story? Did you tell her like, hey, this is kind of how we knew,
Yeah, like I said, she's had to relive the story a bunch of times with us. So, and she's always gracious.
Well, and I appreciate you guys, because you guys also have to relive this. And yeah, the IFC, you got the Ben Franklin Award of Valor, which is presented to teams that you demonstrate exceptional courage, selflessness in the face of danger, and obviously extraordinary life-saving efforts exemplify the true spirit of valor. But I think it's not for the award, and Chief, you really hit on that. It's being able to meet that person again that you just saved, and you impacted their life and their children's lives and their children's lives. That's really the true spirit, I think, of the fire service. And one more question on that. Lieutenant, how did you guys find out you guys were nominated and won the award?
So actually, I was not aware that we were nominated at all until I got the phone call from Chief Blankenship. But ironically, I got a phone call about 30 minutes after coming home from my first shift as a newly promoted lieutenant, and the fire chief called me. And I'm thinking, oh crap, what did I do on my first day as a lieutenant? Get a phone call from the fire chief already, and he explained, and he said, hey, just to let you guys know, we nominated you for the Ben Franklin Award for Valor through the IAFC, and you won. So are you ready to go to Kansas City? Basically is how it went. So I told him, I said, well, I got to talk to my wife. And I think her reaction was, well, if we do have anything planned, I think we're going to reschedule that. We're going to go to Kansas City.
Yeah. Well, I think they should have you guys back. I think Motorola, whoever's listening to this, they should have you back. You should present it. We're going to try to start this trend. You guys should present it to the next year's and then the next year people. So that way you at least get 2 trips out of it. You got some great ribs from Kansas City. I think this next year will be Dallas. You can take on some, country music or whatever they got going on down there. Some brisket and some smoke. I think that's the least they could do for you guys. Again, we appreciate you guys so much for telling the story. For those that are listening, obviously there's some lessons to be learned, and it's all about getting better. But we also, we always like to finish with a couple of hot seat questions. So we're not totally done yet with you guys. So we're going to try to liven it up a little bit, and then end with our main reason for doing the podcast. So Janelle, do you have one hot seat question for the guys real quick?
Yeah, we always like to wrap up with asking, because this is the Better Every Shift podcast, we want to know how everyone else we talk to, how are you working to get better?
I think we should start with Brendan, because we always ended with him. Let's start with Brendan.
Let's start with Brendan,
buddy.
I recently started to get into long distance running, at least building up to a longer distance. I despise running. And after doing a lot of reading a lot and whatnot is actually one of the biggest things for us, at least in recovery. It's huge for cardiovascular. And now, like I said earlier, because my body's starting to remind me of my age, so I have to push harder to maintain the level that I've been at. But that's really one of the things I've done recently. I drive for one of our lieutenants that is one of the creators of our engine company operations, and he is really huge into developing as much training as he possibly can. And we kind of bounce ideas off each other, similar to the way Chief and Lieutenant did when I was working with them. Is just that it's the constant improvement, and then like going to classes or even reading literature, watching videos, podcasts, all that stuff is like continuing to improve every day, and taking some of those unfortunate circumstances, like I said earlier, and making them positive. Like, how are we going to make this better? And how are we going to, what do we do wrong? Or what do we do that we would like to change or maybe work on? Not necessarily change. How can we improve? And that's the way I look at it. So, and that's me personally, how I've read a lot of books recently more about in the leadership side of it, because even though I'm not a current company officer, like I'm still looked upon even when the company officer is off and I'm riding in charge that day, because they're still looking to me guidance for answers. So I have to look at it in a different light. And I think that's over the course of the years of being in this profession, what can I pass on to the next generation? And it is a whole different, like Chief was saying earlier, like It is completely different from what it once was, or at least the stories I heard from Chief, or even guys that have moved on and retired before him that had a lot of similar experiences or different. And it was a whole different profession 30, 45 years ago, 50 years ago. So it's changed a lot, and it continues to change. And if you don't stay at least with it or ahead of it, then when you fall behind, then the risk in our jobs increases, unfortunately.
Yeah. You got to lead. If you're going to lead, you got to learn, and you got to pass that on, right?
Yes.
Very well said. Yeah. Lieutenant, how about you? How are you working to get better?
I think getting better every day changes based on the environment you're in, the needs of the department, the needs of crew, and even the needs of yourself. So right now we have a very young department right now. We just had a few promotions. So my current crew, we have 2 new guys who've been here less than 3 months, 2 new drivers, all the way up to a guy who's getting ready to retire this summer. So we're just focusing on, obviously, the fitness part every day, some sort of hands-on training every day, and then ending the day with some sort of building, which is lately playing cards, and we're really getting good camaraderie between a wide variety of personalities and experience on the fire department. Building that camaraderie with a young team really gets them motivated to want to learn and want to be better and figure out which direction they want to take their career and how we can help them do that.
Yeah. Put the cell phones down, talk to each other, and work together, right? Yeah. Chief, what do you got?
Mine was a little different, and I was kind of in an odd situation. These 2 gentlemen still have many years left on the fire service, and they're going to continue to make great impacts and positive contributions. I was at the point where I was within like a year or so of hitting 25 when this happened, and had fully planned on retiring as a captain on the day that 25 years hit. And sometimes you have one plan and life has another. So an opportunity came about that I wasn't expecting, and a challenge that I felt like I needed at that point in my career to come off of the truck and to run the ship battalion chief role. And I took it. And the biggest thing that I've had to change is the mindset of what my impact can be to the crews. So being in this probably shows my shortcomings as a company officer. When I was on the truck, I was concerned about the truck and the 3 other guys riding with me, and especially with the added interactions between engine and truck companies and the competitiveness. Truck 6 was the only dedicated truck company on the island. Everyone else is either an engine or a quint company, but we're the only dedicated truck company. So I took that as a point of pride. And in all honesty, as long as truck 6 on B shift was doing well, then that's really where my thought process ended. And now I've got 35 guys that I'm looking after, guys and gals. And I see the importance now of the overall improvement of a shift and of a department, and not keeping that knowledge compartmentalized to a certain officer or a certain crew. That if you truly want success, it can't be one crew that's working hard on a scene. It's got to be every crew that's working hard, and it can't be one shift that does things well. It's got to be all 3 shifts that do things well. And that's where I've tried to get better, to expand what I'm watching, what I'm interpreting, and the individuals that I'm interacting with, to get improvement in a wider range. And sometimes it can be, hey, here's what I did and don't do it. This was the wrong way to do it. And then sometimes it can be, hey, I'm watching what you're doing and there's a better way to do it. So I'm by nature an introvert, and probably this is the most I'll talk for the next 3 or 4 days. And I kind of keep a lot of stuff in. And in the past, I probably wouldn't have shared it, or I wouldn't have reached out to individuals. But it goes beyond Hilton Head Island Fire and Rescue. It's the fire service as a whole. We've all got to be making these contributions for all of us to improve, and to see past just what our hands are on and what's in our backyard. The only way things are going to improve for us collectively is if we're all working towards that same goal.
Well, we're glad that you are. You're kind of like Maverick, man. You're like an active guy with 2 saves. I mean, you gotta spread that knowledge, right? And we appreciate you guys for doing that. And the mentality that you guys have is really the essence of the program. So it's obviously a really good fit for you to be here on the Better Every Shift podcast. So thank you for that. Congratulations for the award. And just to note too, for next year's award, the nominations are actually open right now. If you'd like to nominate someone or a crew for the Ben Franklin Award of Valor, you can do it at iafc.org until May 17th. So please take a look at iafc.org, nominate someone for the Ben Franklin Award of Valor. Thanks for listening. If you like what we have to say, if you think we're onto something or on something, you can email us at bettereveryshift@firerescue1.com. Please rate, review, and share the show. And, to reiterate what the Truck 6 is all about and why they really were able to make a phenomenal grab like this is because they dedicated themselves to getting to know each other, building the crew camaraderie, training, and using some kind of informal times to talk about scenarios to make themselves better and to challenge each other. And then having that be ready concept and that ideal that they must be physically fit and ready. And hopefully those are some of the things and the takeaways that you all got from listening or watching the show. Again, it comes down to trying to improve any way we can by learning something, doing something, and sharing something to make you and those around you better every shift. Thank you all for listening.